For generations, really. When we talked about defense in Africa, it was always about, buying things from overseas.
The consumer narrative.
Exactly.
Mm.
But something pretty significant is happening now, especially in East Africa. They're flipping that script.
Yeah.
They're not just buyers anymore. They're increasingly becoming producers.
It's a fascinating shift.
Absolutely. And that's what this deep dive is all about. We're going to unpack this evolution, look at how countries like Rwanda are, well, leading the way, why they're doing it, the economic and strategic reasons, and, of course, the big challenges they and their neighbors are up against.
Yeah, building truly independent capabilities is no small feat.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So the key things you'll get today are, first, this decisive move in East Africa towards self-reliance and defense. It's not just security, it's economic growth too.
Right. Second, Rwanda's definitely out front with some big state-backed projects, but others, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, they're finding their own ways, often involving international partners.
And third, despite the progress, there are still major hurdles. Real success likely needs more regional cooperation and serious, sustained investment. Sound about right?
That sums it up nicely. And a lot of our insight comes from that recent International Security Conference in Africa, ISCA. It was just last month in Kigali.
Ah, yes, ISCA.
That conference really drove home how serious this regional push for homegrown defense has become. You could really feel momentum there.
And Kigali, Rwanda itself, seems like ground zero for a lot of this. So for you listening, think of this as your shortcut. We've gone through the reports, the conference takeaways, so you get the core understanding quickly. We'll break down the motivations, the key moves, and, yeah, the roadblocks these countries face on this path to defense self-sufficiency. Our focus today, Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Tanzania.
Okay.
So let's really get into it, starting with Rwanda. They seem to be the most visible player right now.
Without a doubt. That ISCA summit in Kigali was a perfect stage for them. They had this big display of locally made firearms. It sent a very clear message.
Actions speaking louder than words kind of thing.
Exactly. And then you have President Kagame's rhetoric, very strong statements about Africa needing to own its security challenges, find African solutions for African problems. That's like the philosophical backbone for this whole push towards homegrown defense.
And the engine driving Rwanda's effort is RUMCO, the Rwanda Engineering and Manufacturing Corporation.
One, or REMCO, set up in 2018 right there in the Kigali Special Economic Zone.
Now, its job isn't just making military gear, is it? I read something about a dual mandate.
That's what's really interesting and I think quite strategic about REMCO. Yes, a primary goal is equipping the Rwanda Defense Force, the RDF, and maybe friendly nations too. But they're also deliberately manufacturing for civilian sectors.
Like what?
Things like agriculture, construction, mining, automotive parts, energy components, even healthcare equipment.
Huh. So it's defense and development.
Precisely. It's a dual-use strategy. By investing in advanced manufacturing for defense, they're also building general industrial capacity. The expertise, the infrastructure, CNC machines, casting units, skilled workers, that benefits the whole economy. It's integrated.
That makes sense. They presented a statement of capability at IST, I understand. Sounds pretty formal.
It was very deliberate. If you were there, you'd see a whole range of modern firearms. Our sources list things like the Jericho 941 pistol, known for being comfortable to handle.
Okay.
Assault rifles like the Galil ACE, which has that angled magazine supposed to help with reloading smoothly.
Right.
Even the Tavor X95, that compact bullpup design that's good for close quarters. Plus, sniper rifles, machine guns, night vision sights, body armor, even mentions of tanks. It was a statement, all right, a statement of intent and capability.
But they're not doing this entirely alone, are they? There's a partnership with Israel Weapon Industries, IWI.
Yes, and that's a critical piece of the puzzle. Rwanda's aiming for mostly domestic components, but for now, some things, bullets, magazines, the lenses for sights, are imported. The IWI partnership is key for getting the technology, the know-how, and designs that are, well, battle-proven.
That kind of partnership might attract some political heat, though, couldn't it?
It potentially could, yes, given IWI's global footprint and, political sensitivities. But it really highlights Rwanda's pragmatic approach.
Yeah.
Get the tech you need to meet the goal.
So this whole self-reliance push, it has deeper roots, not just a recent thing.
Well, the modern manufacturing is recent, but the idea isn't entirely new. Sources point out that historically, Rwanda had its own martial traditions, its own weapons, spears, arrows, that kind of thing. Not making those today, obviously, but it shows a long history of valuing military capability.
Okay.
But the modern drivers are what's really propelling this current initiative.
Right. Let's unpack those. What's the main motivation now?
Number one is national security, plain and simple, and reducing dependency on foreign suppliers. President Kagame hits this point again and again.
Okay, less reliance on others. Makes sense. What else?
Import substitution is big. Making things at home instead of dying abroad saves money, keeps it in the country. Then there's job creation that ties into their national development plans, like Vision 2020 and 2050.
So economic factors, too.
Definitely. And they're looking outwards as well, aiming for export growth, potentially supplying neighbors. Plus, REMCO acts as sort of an anchor company for wider industrial growth. It's a tool for government industrial policy, maybe even helping consolidate elite support and stability.
We know Rwanda's manufacturing sector is already pretty substantial. What was it, $1.39 billion output in 2023? And Remco's using some advanced tech.
Yeah, the mention of CNC machines, CAD/CAM labs, their own ferrous casting unit that points to serious investment in modern manufacturing tools. And they're quite open about it. Most components domestic now, but these specific things are still imported. It shows a clear, phased approach to localization.
And Rwanda definitely sees itself playing a bigger security role in the region, right?
Absolutely. Kagame's call for African ownership of security is central here. Rwanda's stepped up its deployments. It's one of the biggest contributors to UN peacekeeping, certainly among African nations. They're positioning themselves as a key, maybe even pivotal, security provider.
So what are the upsides, the economic and geopolitical wins they're hoping for?
Well, becoming a regional arms supplier could mean serious export money. Cutting down on foreign arms imports saves cash and gives them more political freedom.
Right.
And being a security provider can translate into economic influence, maybe better access to resources or projects in other countries. And, having a strong domestic defense industry just looks good. It projects strength, capability.
But it's not all smooth sailing. There are criticisms, complexities.
Oh, absolutely. That's important to remember. While they talk about African solutions, Rwanda's own military actions in the region, like alleged support for M23 in Congo, raise questions. Who really benefits? There's this complex dance between wanting regional stability and pursuing national security and economic goals, and sometimes they seem to pull in different directions.
Okay, so Rwanda's definitely a major force here, but let's broaden the view. What about other East African countries? How does Kenya fit into this?
Kenya's actually been involved in defense production for quite a while, maybe just not as loudly as Rwanda recently. They set up the Kenya Ordnance Factories Corporation, KOFC, way back in 1997.
97, okay. What do they do?
KOFC is based in Eldoret, and their main focus has been on small arms, ammunition, and related stuff. They're ISO certified, aiming for self-sufficiency in ammo. Quality is a focus.
But they've moved into actual weapons more recently with the national security industries in Ruru.
That's right. Launched in 2021, it was a pretty big investment, around $37.5 million US. Right now, they're making receivers for AR-15 style rifles, and impressively, about 60% of the components are already sourced locally.
60% local already, that's quite high.
It is, and they have big plans. The goal is to supply all of Kenya's security forces with small arms within 5 years. Then maybe move into 7.62 millimeter rifles, 9 millimeter pistols, and down the line, possibly medium and heavy weapons too. President Kenyatta was clear. Make Kenya a real weapons manufacturer, cut costs, boost security independence.
And Kenya's also looking seaward with Kenya Shipyards Limited, KSL.
Exactly. That started in 2020. KSL's about shipbuilding, repairs, maintenance for ships. It's partly about reducing reliance on foreign yards, but also tapping into that whole blue economy idea. So Kenya's approach is a bit more diversified than just guns and ammo.
Okay. Now, moving over to Uganda, their approach seems quite different, leaning heavily on international partnership.
Yeah, Uganda's big move involved setting up NSC Strait Limited in 2019. That's a joint venture between their state-owned National Enterprise Corporation, NEC, and Strait Group, which is based in the UAE.
Strait Group, they make armored vehicles, right?
They do. And crucially, Strait provided the full funding and the technology transfer for a manufacturing plant in Nakasongola. It's been running since mid-2022.
Armored vehicles are a specific niche. Are they just for Uganda's own forces?
Not entirely. The Nakasongola plant can apparently produce about 40 vehicles a month for security and civilian use. They're actively marketing them regionally, even have a public showroom. Reports say they've already landed a few export contracts.
Interesting. They're really commercializing it.
Very much so. It's a focused, commercially driven strategy. And interestingly, the sources also mention ongoing developments in drone manufacturing at that same Nakasongola site. So they might be branching out. But the key for Uganda was that big foreign investment and tech transfer from Strait really jump-started their capability in that specific armored vehicle sector.
Okay, now Ethiopia. They seem to have a much longer track record in this area compared to the others.
Oh, absolutely. Ethiopia's history goes way back, even mentions of Emperor Tewodros trying things in the 1860s, a modern factory in 1911, and big expansion under the Derg regime with Soviet help.
So they have established players.
Definitely. Key ones include the Homicher Ammunition Engineering Complex. They make a huge range of ammo, from small arms up to heavier stuff, and also metal parts for civilian industry. And the Gafat Armament Engineering Complex, established in '86, makes things like AK-47s, machine guns, grenade launchers, sniper scopes. Both operate under the big state conglomerate METEC.
Sounds much more established, more diversified than some others.
It is. They also have places for heavy armament repair, aircraft overhaul, even making uniforms and hospital beds. And they're moving into UAVs too, with Skywin Aeronautics Industries and the Air Force getting armed drones. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has even claimed Ethiopia is making significant arms sales, maybe $30 million, potentially making them Africa's third largest exporter.
Wow, third largest. That's a big claim.
It is. It's framed as part of self-reliance, especially after the recent conflict showed how vulnerable they were relying on outside suppliers.
But are those export numbers solid? Any skepticism?
Yes, there is. Analysts point out a lack of transparency. Who are the buyers? What exactly are they selling? It's not clear. There's a feeling that maybe production is still mostly for their own needs, and the big export dream faces hurdles with transparency and building trust with international buyers.
Okay, that makes sense. Finally, Tanzania. Their approach seems a bit different again, maybe more focused on future plans.
Tanzania has the Mzinga Corporation, which dates back to 1971. It has a broad mandate: military and civilian gear, arms, ammo, explosives, R&D. But the current buzz seems to be around a planned modernization of their military, the TPDF, for the next fiscal year.
Modernization, involving local industry.
That's the key part. The plan explicitly mentions supporting development of local military industries in collaboration with the private sector. It feels like they're at an earlier stage of formalizing this kind of industrial push compared to, say, Rwanda or Kenya, but they have a clear strategy forming and they want the private sector involved.
Now, Tanzania's situation is unique, too. No recent civil war, but they've had issues with arms smuggling in the region and domestic gun problems, right? Does that play into this?
It likely does, even without a major conflict. Those historical issues with regional arms flows and current domestic gun control challenges probably add weight to their desire for better control over weapon supply and manufacturing. It becomes about both external defense and internal stability. Right now, though, most of their military kit is still imported.
So a real mix of approaches across the region. Looking at the big picture, what are the common roadblocks, the hurdles they all face?
There are definitely shared challenges. Funding is a huge one. This stuff requires massive, sustained capital investment.
Money talks.
Always. Then there's the technology gap. Reducing reliance on foreign expertise means big investments in STEM education, in R&D. Right now, regional approaches often feel fragmented, everyone doing their own thing instead of coordinating.
Yeah, lack of synergy.
Exactly. Plus, you need strong supporting industries, companies that can make specialized components, supply the right raw materials. Political instability, internal or regional, is always a risk that can derail long-term plans. And, as we saw with Ethiopia, transparency and accountability are crucial for building trust and legitimacy, especially around exports.
It feels like a bit of a paradox, doesn't it? The goal is self-reliance, but they still seem quite dependent on foreign partners' imported parts.
That's a really sharp point. You could call the current phase maybe strategic localization and diversified dependency. Full self-sufficiency in modern defense is incredibly hard, maybe even unrealistic for many right now. So they're strategically picking areas they can control, build domestic capacity, while still relying on global partners and supply chains for the really high-tech or specialized stuff.
And the challenges aren't just about building the factories themselves.
Not at all. It's the whole ecosystem, the skilled workforce, the funding mechanisms, the integration with national policy, those supporting industries we mentioned. It needs a holistic approach.
So, given all these hurdles, what are the pathways forward? How can they make real progress?
Well, more regional collaboration seems essential. Pooling resources, maybe standardizing some equipment so forces can work together better, sharing expertise. Think about an African Defense Production Alliance, maybe like ECOWAS or CESAE-DC, but focused on production. Collective action is key.
Makes sense. Strength in numbers.
Right. And continuing with strategic technology transfer through those partnerships like Rwanda, IWI, or Uganda Street, but making sure the terms really build local capacity. Massive investment in R&D and education, particularly STEM, is non-negotiable for long-term innovation.
And that dual-use approach we saw in Rwanda.
That seems really smart. Integrating defense into broader industrial plans, like REMCO does, makes it more economically sustainable. Don't just build tanks, build tractors too, using similar skills in factories.
Okay.
Also, a phased approach probably makes the most sense. Start with small arms, ammunition, basic vehicles, then gradually build up to more complex systems. And none of this happens without sustained strategic investment and real political will from the top. Consistent commitment is crucial.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What's the main takeaway for everyone listening?
I think the core message is that East Africa is genuinely going through a major strategic shift in how it thinks about defense. It's not just about buying weapons anymore. It's a deliberate push, driven by a real desire for more self-reliance, clear economic goals, and wanting more regional influence.
And even though the challenges are definitely real and significant, the momentum is there. The strategic thinking is happening. It suggests a future where East Africa plays a much bigger part in its own security.
Exactly. The hurdles are high, no doubt, but the direction of travel seems clear. They're actively building pathways towards greater defense capability. It's a complex story, still unfolding, but potentially transformative for the continent.
So a final thought for you, the listener. Think about what this all means for the bigger picture. How could a more self-sufficient African defense industry change global power dynamics? Is a truly independent African security structure a realistic long-term possibility? And maybe critically, how do these countries balance their national ambitions with the need for regional cooperation to actually achieve that vision? Lots to chew on there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.